Saint Gemma Galgani, the Lily of Lucca, was born in Camigliano, Italy, on March 12, 1878. She was the fourth of 8 children. Gemma was known for donating her suffering to God and living an ordinary life for the conversion of sinners. At age 7, Gemma's mother got tuberculosis. On the day of her confirmation, May 26, 1885, the first of many heavenly visions came to Gemma. A voice in her heart said to her, "Will you give me your mama?" She answered, "Yes, if you'll take me as well." The voice replied, "No, give me your mama without reserve. I will take you to heaven later." This was her first great sacrifice, and it cost her bitter grief and tears. But when her mother died a few months later, it was Gemma who consoled the others. Gemma was only 8 years old when she said, "Why should we cry? Mama has gone to heaven." Gemma took on the duties of the mother in the house, and she helped sew altar linens and other garments for the church. Gemma's mother taught her to want to go to heaven and to sacrifice to God in order to show faith. She often said the whole 15 decades of the Rosary on her knees after she returned from school, and she began to use penances and to rise in the night to pray. Gemma started a life trying to live as a saint and offered her suffering in whatever way she could. She was sent to school of St. Zita in Lucca, where she learned to greater appreciate prayer and become closer to God. She would say, "Gemma is good for nothing, but Gemma and Jesus can do all things." Gemma was so devoted to Jesus that when she got a foot infection and had to have surgery, she refused anesthetic and watched the crucifix throughout her surgery. She showed minimal pain because she was focused on offering her suffering to Jesus as he did for us on the cross. She always had a soft spot for those who suffer and are poor. Gemma would gather the poor children in her neighborhood and teach them introductions into the Catholic Church. Gemma did not stop there. She would make frequent visits to hospitals to visit the sick and elderly. There, she would bring them material things, but most importantly, teach them about God and His kingdom in heaven. Gemma would also bring bread, money, or any scraps she could find anywhere she went, so that if she saw a person in need, she could help them in some way. Gemma was consumed in prayer and yearned to follow Jesus in all ways possible. She would pray to Jesus, asking him to allow her to suffer with him, to grant her the greatest suffering so that she may have a chance of getting to heaven. God answered her prayers of wanting to suffer with him, and she was diagnosed with spinal tuberculosis or spinal meningitis. Gemma was bedridden, where she received a miraculous recovery from this incurable disease. On the 1st of March, 1899, Jesus said to her, "Do you wish to be cured?" She answered, "Whatever you will, O Jesus." Then he said, "My child, the grace you have received this morning will be followed by many others still greater." Gemma promised to recite the Holy Hour every Thursday night in honor of Jesus. She kept this promise for the rest of her life. It were these Thursday nights that Jesus started to fill her with the promised graces. Jesus kept visiting her and showing her visions of his wounds. On a Thursday night, June 8th, the eve of the Feast of the Sacred Heart, Jesus, Mary, and Gemma's guardian angel appeared to her in a vivid vision. There she said an act of contrition, and they said her sins had been forgiven, and Jesus appeared with open wounds. This time, the blood flowing from his wounds was fire, and it came to her feet, hands, and heart. The places where the fire hit started to bleed, and she wrapped them with linens and went to bed. She felt immense pain, and that pain persisted until Friday at 3 p.m. This was on the Feast of the Sacred Heart. From her earliest childhood, the thought of Jesus being crucified filled her with a sense of her own sinfulness and a desire to pay for it. She wanted to be associated with him in his sufferings and to share them in reparation for the sins of the world. To win souls for Jesus through prayer and suffering were the one passion of her life. Gemma was granted one last suffering on Pentecost, 1902, when she suddenly became gravely ill with an unknown sickness. The illness reduced her appetite and filled her body with grave pain. She was also reduced to skin and bones. In the beginning, she managed to make it to Mass for Holy Communion, until she could no longer bring herself to move. This persisted for the remaining months of her life until she died on April 11, 1903. Gemma's life after her cure was filled with visions of Christ and suffering for him. That is one reason she is a saint. Gemma lived the life as a gracious saint who offered every bit of suffering to Jesus and was glad when a time of immense pain came to her because she could feel a small bit of how Jesus felt on the cross. Gemma did not resent God for the numerous diseases she had, and when she became gravely ill and could no longer fight, she offered her suffering and sin, hoping he would save a spot for her in heaven. Gemma had a soft spot for the poor and sick, and she helped them in any way possible. She would go out of her way to help others and lived her life in continuous prayer, never forgetting Jesus' sacrifice for us. Gemma Galgani was beatified by Pope Pius XI on May 14, 1933, and canonized by Pope Pius XII on the Ascension Thursday, May 2, 1940. She is the saint of the Passion of Christ, and her life helps remind others of the importance of faith and compassion. Gemma's actions help me want to be closer to God and thank Him every day for what He did for us. Her continuous prayer and sacrifice help show me that God forgives everyone and that it's up to us to say sorry and work for forgiveness. I hope that one day I can live in the footsteps of Gemma and help anyone in need. Gemma was always willing to go out of her way to help the poor and sick, and I know that I can start living in her footsteps by helping those in need. After learning about Gemma's saintly life, I wanted to help anyone in need in whatever way possible. Gemma particularly fits under the category of a woman who develops her personal spirituality in an active faith life. By devoting her life to God through prayer and sacrifice, Gemma lived out her spirituality and showed faith every day of her life. Her famous saying that Gemma alone can do nothing, but Gemma and Jesus can achieve all things, truly shows her faith in God and her trust in Him. Her continuous prayer helped her thrive in life even though she had numerous diseases and lost her mom at a very young age. Gemma's life was filled with hardship, but she always put others first, especially God. Gemma embodies a gospel-centered woman in numerous ways, but these are just a few instances in which she kept her faith and lived out good Christian values. When Gemma's mother died, she took care of her family and even helped poor children by teaching them about Christianity. Gemma stayed close to God through her life and never blamed Him for taking her mother or giving her diseases. Instead, she thanked Him, because her faith was so strong that she did not mind being ill since she could offer that suffering to Jesus. She hoped that her suffering and penance would act as remuneration for the sins of the world. Gemma truly is the gem of Christ, and she showed that every day of her life.